They call it operations. I call it keeping a living breathing machine from tearing itself apart at 70 miles per hour. My name is Erla Moore, for 21 years. I was the quiet constant inside North Star Freight Dynamics, a company that moved everything from winter produce to emergency generators across half the country. You've never heard my name, but if something showed up exactly when it needed to, there's a good chance I had a hand in it. Before I tell you how I took down this entire system, make sure to hit the like button. I'm curious, where are you listening from right now? What's the temperature like where you are? All right, now let's continue. I wasn't the face of the company. No corner office, no polished speeches, just a worn desk buried deep in the operations floor, surrounded by shipment logs, contracts, and handwritten notes that looked like chaos to anyone who didn't understand the system. But that chaos was the map, the pulse, the difference between a delivery arriving on time or $1 million failure. I knew which carriers padded their miles, which port supervisors would delay a shipment just to prove a point, which drivers would cross a snowstorm at midnight because I'd helped them out years ago. Relationships, not software, kept this company alive. And for a long time, that was understood. That was, Mr. Dalton, the founder. Didn't pretend to know every detail, but he respected the people who did. We had an unspoken agreement I kept the system running, and he stayed out of my way. It worked. For decades. Then he stepped down. Retirement. They said. A quiet exit to some coastal estate where the only logistics problem was choosing which wine to open. And in his place came his daughter, Marissa Dalton, 34, MBA. Perfect smile, zero operational experience. She walked in like the company was a stage she had already mastered. Clean offices, new policies, buzzwords about culture, alignment, and fresh energy. And always by her side, Lydia, her church friend, recently hired, recently promoted, recently placed above people who had spent years earning their roles. That was the moment I felt it. Not the change, the shift, like a gear slipping just slightly out of place. Most people didn't notice it yet. I did. Just so you know, this story is fictional and enhanced with the help of AI to make it more vivid and engaging. Still, I believe you'll feel real emotions and take away some meaningful lessons from it. Now, let's continue. The first week, nothing broke. That's how you know the damage is real. It doesn't arrive with alarms or flashing lights. It settles in quietly, like dust in the gears. Marissa didn't come down to the operations floor much at first. When she did, it wasn't to learn. It was to observe, to evaluate, to decide what needed to be updated. She walked slowly between the rows of desks, Lydia half a step behind her, holding a tablet like she was documenting a museum exhibit. I kept my eyes on my work. That had always been the rule. Do the job. Keep the system moving. Let the noise pass over you. But Marissa didn't believe in silence. She believed in visibility. By the second week, meetings started appearing on my calendar. Not the kind that solved problems. The kind that discussed them in circles until the urgency disappeared. Strategy alignment, cultural reset, operational transparency. Words that sounded impressive but meant nothing when a shipment was sitting at a locked gate at 3 a.m. I attended the first one out of respect. Marissa stood at the front of the glass conference room, smiling like she had already fixed everything. Lydia sat beside her, nodding at every sentence, occasionally adding something about team energy or shared vision. They talked about replacing manual processes with automated dashboards, about reducing dependency on individual knowledge, about standardizing communication through internal platforms instead of direct calls. I raised my hand once. What happens when the system goes down? I asked. Who picks up the phone when a driver is stuck at a checkpoint and the software can't verify his clearance? Marissa didn't hesitate. That's why we're investing in better systems. Erla. So those situations don't happen. I almost smiled, because situations like that always happen. By the third week, the changes weren't theoretical anymore. They started pulling pieces out of the machine without understanding what they were connected to. Lydia was promoted again. Official title Operations Coordinator. unofficial reality oversight of people who had been doing this job longer than she'd been employed. She started sending instructions through the new platform, long messages filled with bullet points and cheerful language that completely ignored how things actually worked. She'd flag issues that weren't problems and overlook the ones that could cost us millions. One morning, she stopped by my desk. "Arela," she said, voice soft but rehearsed. "We noticed you're still using paper logs. We'd really prefer if you transitioned everything to the system. It's more aligned with our workflow." I didn't look up immediately. I finished the note I was writing, circled a shipment ID, then set the pen down. "This system doesn't track port delays in real time," I said, "and it doesn't flag manual overrides from customs. Paper does." She blinked. "Well, the system is designed to improve efficiency. It improves appearances." I replied, "Not outcomes." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "We're all adjusting." That was the word they loved. Adjusting. As if experience was something you could just set aside. As if the machine would politely wait while they figured it out. I watched them from a distance after that. The way Marissa spoke with confidence about processes she had never handled. The way Lydia echoed her, reinforcing ideas that sounded good in a room but collapsed in the real world. They didn't hate me. That would have been easier. They dismissed me, to them. I wasn't essential. I was outdated. A leftover piece from a version of the company they were trying to replace. But systems like this don't fail all at once. They weaken slowly, and I could already hear the strain. The strain didn't stay subtle for long. It never does when real money is on the line. It was a Wednesday morning when the Gulf contract started slipping. Not officially, not in a report. Just a tone and a voice on the phone that told me things were about to go sideways. Coastal Freight Union, one of our most volatile partners. They didn't negotiate with spreadsheets. They negotiated with leverage, timing, and memory, and they remembered everything. I had been working that renewal for weeks. Quietly, carefully. It was a 5-year agreement tied to our southern shipping lanes, worth tens of millions in quarterly flow alone. If we lost it, the ripple would hit everything from warehouse capacity to driver allocation within days. Big Ron was on the line. He didn't waste words. "Your new leadership," he said. Voice rough like gravel dragged across concrete. They sent over a revised draft. I leaned back slightly, already feeling the problem before he finished. "What kind of revision, cutting rate adjustments, changing liability terms? Looks like someone who's never dealt with a hurricane season wrote it." Of course they did. I closed my eyes for a second, then opened the contract file on my screen. Sure enough, Lydia's name was on the latest version. Approved by Marissa. They had tried to optimize something they didn't understand. "Give me 2 hours," I said. "Don't sign anything. Don't reject it either." "You got one," Ron replied, then hung up. I stood up immediately. No meeting request, no calendar invite. I walked straight to the conference room where Marissa and Lydia were reviewing something on a large screen. "Who authorized the changes to the coastal contract?" I asked. Marissa turned, calm as ever. "We did. The previous terms were outdated. We're improving margins. You're destroying the agreement," I said. "They won't accept those terms." Lydia crossed her arms slightly. "We believe the data supports a stronger position. The data doesn't sit across from Ron when a port shuts down." I replied, "The data doesn't remember who kept shipments moving during a strike." Marissa's smile thinned just a little. "Arela, we appreciate your input, but we're moving toward a more scalable model. We can't rely on informal relationships forever." That was the line. Informal relationships. I nodded once, not in agreement, in understanding. "Then don't," I said quietly. "But if you lose this, you don't get it back." I walked out before they could respond, back at my desk. I picked up the phone and called Ron again. Then another contact. Then another. Conversations layered over each other like a system rerouting itself in real time. I rewrote the contract manually, clause by clause, restoring what mattered, adjusting what needed to be softened, leaving just enough of their improvements to make it look like a compromise. It took 90 minutes. When I sent it back, I didn't copy Marissa or Lydia. Ron called 10 minutes later. That's the version I remember. He said, "We're good. 5 years." I asked, "5 years?" He confirmed. I hung up and leaned back, staring at the ceiling for a second. 40 million secured. Minimum? By the afternoon, operations stabilized again. Routes held, schedules aligned. The machine corrected itself. No announcement came, no acknowledgement. What I got instead was an email from Lydia. Subject line, desk compliance reminder. She stepped by shortly after, tablet in hand. Tone polite but firm. "Arela, we've noticed your workspace doesn't meet the new clean desk standards. There's too much paper visible. It creates the wrong impression." I looked at her for a moment, then at the stacks of notes that had just saved their contract. "This is the system," I said. She smiled again. That same practiced expression. "It's not aligned with our visual standards." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because that was the moment everything became clear. They didn't see value, they saw optics, and in a company built on appearances instead of understanding. The collapse isn't a question of if, it's a question of when. The question of when answered itself sooner than I expected. It didn't come as a crisis. Not at first. It came as an email. Subject line, mandatory attendance. Celebrating leadership excellence. I opened it between 2 calls, expecting another meeting request I could ignore or reschedule. Instead, I found an invitation, glossy language, over-designed formatting, the kind of message that tried too hard to feel important. A private event at the Dalton estate, Saturday night, formal attire, cocktails, speeches, networking, a celebration of Marissa Dalton's vision and leadership, attendance required for all senior operational staff. I read it twice. Saturday, of all days. That was the peak window. The exact night when inbound shipments from the West Coast hit our distribution chain. The same night I was scheduled to oversee a temperature-sensitive pharmaceutical load moving through 3 checkpoints. If anything went wrong, it wouldn't just be a delay, it would be spoilage, insurance claims, and regulatory attention. I leaned back slightly, staring at the screen. They didn't know. Or worse, they didn't care. My phone buzzed again. Dispatch from Arizona. A minor routing issue. I handled it quickly. Then returned to the email. Lydia's name was at the bottom. Of course it was. I clicked reply. "Marissa, congratulations on the event. Unfortunately, I won't be able to attend. I'm assigned to oversee a critical logistics operation Saturday night involving temperature-controlled medical shipments. It requires live monitoring. Wishing you a successful evening." I kept it short, professional, neutral. I hit send and moved on. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. The next morning, the atmosphere shifted again. Not loudly, not visibly, but enough. People looked at me differently. Conversations paused when I walked by. Small signals. Barely noticeable unless you knew what to look for. I sat down, logged into my system, and started reviewing the weekend schedule. Everything was tight. Every route, every checkpoint, every handoff accounted for. At 10:15, Lydia appeared beside my desk. She didn't sit, just stood there, tablet in hand. "Arela," she said lightly. "I saw your response to the invitation. I assumed you would." She smiled. But there was an edge now. Marissa was a little surprised. "I'm working that night. It's an important event." "So is the shipment." She tilted her head slightly, like she was trying to understand a language she didn't speak. "This is about showing support," she said. "Being present, aligning with leadership. This is about preventing a loss," I replied, "and keeping a contract intact." Her expression tightened. "Just for a second?" "Well," she said, tapping something on her screen, "I'll let Marissa know you've chosen not to attend." Chosen, that word again. as if priorities were a preference, not a responsibility. Let her know I'll be available, I added. Just not at a party. Lydia didn't respond. She just nodded once and walked away. I watched her go, then turned back to my screen. For the rest of the day, nothing else was said directly, no confrontation, no escalation. But the silence felt different, heavier, like something had been decided without being announced. By the afternoon, I was deep into contingency planning, backup routes, secondary carriers, manual overrides in case the system failed. I wasn't taking chances, because unlike them, I understood how fragile everything really was. Around 4:30, another email came through. No subject line this time, just a short message from Marissa. Noted. That was all it said. No signature, no explanation. I stared at it for a moment longer than I should have. Then I closed it. It didn't matter. The work did. I stayed late that evening, going over every detail twice. By the time I left, the office was nearly empty. Lights dimmed. Quiet halls. On my way out, I passed the conference room. Marissa and Lydia were still inside, talking. I didn't stop. I didn't need to hear it. Some things you can feel without listening. I walked to my car. The air cooler than usual. The sky already dark. Saturday was coming, and something about it didn't feel routine anymore. Saturday didn't arrive with noise. It came quietly, like any other high-pressure day that didn't have the luxury of being dramatic. I was at my desk before sunrise. The building was nearly empty. Just the low hum of machines and the occasional echo of footsteps from overnight staff finishing their shifts. I liked it that way. No distractions, no meetings, just the system and the responsibility of keeping it moving. By 7 a.m., I was already tracking inbound shipments from the West Coast. The pharmaceutical load had cleared the first checkpoint. Temperature stable, no deviations. Good start. I poured myself a cup of coffee that had been sitting too long on the burner and opened the live dashboard. 3 screens. One for route tracking, one for communications, one for contingency overrides. This was where I was supposed to be. Not in a dress, not holding a glass of something overpriced, pretending to care about conversations that had nothing to do with the work. At 9:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. A message from Lydia. Don't forget tonight. Marissa is expecting everyone. I stared at it for a second, then set the phone down without replying. The second checkpoint flagged a minor delay at 10:03. Customs clearance lag. I picked up the phone, called the supervisor directly, bypassed the system, and resolved it in under 6 minutes. That's how it worked. Not perfectly, not cleanly, but effectively by midday. Everything was still on track. I allowed myself a moment to breathe, leaning back in my chair, eyes scanning the data without really seeing it. Then the next message came, this time from Marissa. We should talk about your priorities. Short, controlled, meant to sound professional. I didn't respond. There was nothing to discuss. At 3:30 p.m., the office started filling up slightly. A few managers came in to show presence before heading out to get ready for the event. I watched them pass by my desk, dressed sharper than usual, voices lighter. Energy shifted towards something that had nothing to do with the job. One of them paused. You're really not going? He asked quietly. No. He hesitated. Might not be a great look. Neither is a failed shipment. I replied. He nodded once, then walked away. By early evening, the building emptied again. Silence returned. At 6:45 p.m., I got the final confirmation. The shipment was entering the last phase. Temperature holding, timing tight but manageable. I stayed focused. 7:10 p.m. Another message from Lydia. You're making this harder than it needs to be. I exhaled slowly, then typed a response. I'm doing my job. I didn't send anything else. No explanation, no justification, just the truth. Minutes passed, then an hour. The system held. By 8:30 p.m., the critical window was closing. The shipment cleared the final checkpoint. No loss, no delay, no issue. I leaned back in my chair, letting the tension drain out of my shoulders. It was done, exactly as planned. I looked around the empty office, the dim lights reflecting off the screens, the quiet hum still steady and unchanged. This was what success looked like. Invisible. At 9:02 p.m., my phone buzzed again. A single message from Marissa. "We'll address this Monday. No emotion, no detail, but I understood it perfectly. This was no longer about a party, it was about control. And I had just made it very clear that mine didn't come from her." I turned off one of the monitors, then another, leaving only the main system running in the background. Outside. The night was still. Inside. Everything had worked, but something else had shifted. Not in the system, in the way I was being seen. And I had a feeling Monday wasn't going to be a conversation. Monday didn't wait. It arrived cold, quiet, and already decided. I walked into the building at 8:47 a.m., the same way I had for years. Same entrance, same badge swipe, same nod to the security guard who didn't look up from his screen. Nothing about the outside suggested anything had changed. Inside felt different. You don't notice it at first. It's not something you see, it's something you feel. Conversations cut shorter, eye contact avoided, the kind of silence that doesn't come from calm, but from anticipation. I reached my desk, set my bag down, and powered on my computer. The screen blinked once, then twice. Access denied. I paused, fingers still on the keyboard. That didn't make sense. I typed my credentials again. Slower this time. Access denied. A third time. Same result. I leaned back slightly, already knowing, not guessing. Knowing, before I could reach for my phone. I heard the sound of heels against the floor, measured, intentional, not rushed, not hesitant. I turned. Marissa was walking toward me, Lydia beside her, and two men behind them I didn't recognize, both wearing neutral expressions that didn't belong in an operations office. They stopped at my desk. No greeting, no pretense. "Erla," Marissa said, voice calm, almost rehearsed. "We need to talk." I didn't stand. I figured. She glanced briefly at my screen, then back at me. "You're no longer authorized to access company systems," I noticed. Lydia stepped forward slightly, tablet in hand like always, but her tone had changed, less polite, more official. "This decision follows a review of your alignment with company culture and leadership expectations." I looked at her, then back at Marissa. "So this is about Saturday." Marissa didn't flinch. "This is about your inability to operate within the direction the company is moving." I held her gaze. "I kept your shipment from failing. This isn't about one task," she replied. "It's about consistency, collaboration, presence. That word again. "You're firing me," I said. It wasn't a question. A brief pause. Then Marissa nodded once, effective immediately. The room went still, not because of the words, because of how cleanly they were delivered. No hesitation, no emotion, just a decision, packaged and finalized. I sat there for a moment longer, letting it settle. Not the anger. That hadn't arrived yet. Just the clarity. "You understand what I handle," I said quietly. "The contracts, the vendors, the approvals tied to my authorization." Lydia responded this time. "We have systems in place." I almost smiled. "You have interfaces." I said, "Not systems." Marissa's expression tightened slightly. "Everything you've done here can be transitioned." "No," I replied. "It can't." Silence stretched between us. Not loud, but heavy. One of the men behind them shifted his weight slightly. "Security. Not here for conversation. Here for completion." Marissa extended her hand. "Your badge." I looked at it for a second. A small piece of plastic. 21 years of access reduced to something that could be handed over in less than a second. I reached into my pocket, pulled it out, and placed it in her hand. No resistance, No argument, just motion. "Thank you for your service," she said. It sounded like something copied from a script. I stood up slowly, picked up my bag, and glanced at my desk. The notes, the papers, the things Lydia had wanted gone. I left them. They wouldn't understand them anyway. As I stepped away, Lydia spoke again. "We'll need you to refrain from contacting any company partners." I paused, turned slightly. "That won't be necessary," I said, because they had already made the mistake. They just didn't know it yet. I walked toward the elevator, the sound of my own footsteps louder than usual in the quiet office. No one stopped me. No one said anything. The doors opened. I stepped inside. And as they closed, cutting off the last view of that floor, I checked the time. 9:14 a.m. By 9:30, the system would start asking questions. And by 10 o'clock, it wouldn't wait for answers anymore. If you think Marissa Dalton was right to fire someone just for skipping a party, comment well done. But if you believe she valued ego over real responsibility, right wrong. True leadership isn't about control, it's about understanding. And sometimes, one decision reveals everything. The elevator doors opened to a world that felt strangely quiet. Not peaceful, not calm, just disconnected. I stepped out into the parking lot. The air colder than it should have been for that time of year. The sky hung low and gray, like it was waiting for something to happen, for the first time in years. I didn't have a schedule dictating my next move, but I wasn't lost. I was recalculating. I got into my car and closed the door slowly, letting the silence settle around me. No ringing phones, no incoming alerts, no system dashboards demanding attention. Most people would panic right here. I didn't. Because the system didn't just exist inside that building, it existed in people. And those people still had my number. I pulled out my phone, opened my personal email, the one I had used for years as a quiet backup. Not official, not documented. Just a direct line for when things went wrong and no one trusted the company channel. I started typing, subject notice of change in authorized contact to whom it may concern. Effective immediately. I, Erla Moore, am no longer employed by North Star Freight Dynamics. As such, I am no longer the authorized point of contact or signatory for any ongoing contracts, service agreements, or compliance verifications. Per Clause 9C of our Master Service Agreements, the departure of designated personnel may trigger a temporary suspension or review of operations until a qualified replacement is confirmed. Please direct all urgent matters to current executive leadership. Regards, Erla Moore. I read it once. Then again, clean, factual, legally precise, nothing emotional, nothing accusatory, just information. That was the beauty of it. I wasn't breaking anything. I was following the rules. I sent the first email, then the second, then the third. I moved down my contact list methodically. Carrier partners, port authorities, customs brokers, independent operators who trusted me more than any contract they had signed. Each message identical, each one a small shift. My phone buzzed before I finished the first round. Incoming call. Jackson Freight Dispatch. I let it ring once before answering. Erla. The voice came through immediately, tight with concern. We just got your email. What's going on? I'm out, I said simply. A pause. That's not good. No, I agreed. It's not. You still signing off on the west route tonight? No. Another pause. Longer this time. Then we're holding. I leaned back slightly in my seat. That's your call, I said. We don't move without clearance, he replied. You know that. I do. The line went quiet for a second before he spoke again. They know what they just did. I don't think so. Yeah. He exhaled. Figures. The call ended. I looked at my inbox. More replies were coming in now. Questions, concerns, confirmations. Not panic. Not yet. But uncertainty. And in logistics, Uncertainty is enough to stop everything. I continued sending, one by one, each email another thread loosening. Then my phone lit up again. Unknown number. I answered. Erla, this is Port Camden Authority. We received your notice. Can you confirm status on the inbound clearance? For tonight, I'm no longer authorized to confirm anything. I said, that's a problem. He replied, yes. Silence. Then, we'll have to pause until we get verified authorization. That would be consistent with Clause 9C. Another pause. Understood. The call ended. I set the phone down for a moment, staring through the windshield at nothing in particular. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't argued. I hadn't even told anyone to stop. I just removed the one thing the system depended on. Certainty. And without that, everything slowed. Then stopped. My phone buzzed again. This time, a message from Lydia. What did you do? I looked at the screen for a second, then locked the phone without replying. Because by now, it wasn't about what I did. It was about what they had already set in motion by the time I started the engine. The first cracks had already turned into fractures. It doesn't take much to slow a system like that. Just a few missing confirmations. A few unanswered approvals. A few people deciding it's safer to wait than to move. I pulled out of the parking lot and drove without a destination at first, letting the motion clear my head. My phone stayed on the passenger seat, screen lighting up every few seconds with new calls and messages stacking on top of each other. I didn't answer most of them. I didn't need to. The pattern was already forming. At 9:32 a.m., a text came through from a dispatcher I'd worked with for years. Midwest Hub is holding. No clearance. At 9:41, another. Fuel cards declined for 3 trucks. Vendor froze account. I exhaled slowly. That was faster than expected. I turned onto the main road, passing a line of North Star trucks heading toward the distribution center. They looked the same as always, clean, branded, moving with purpose. They just didn't know yet. By the time they reached their next checkpoint, that movement would stop. I drove toward a small diner a few miles away, a place I'd used as an unofficial meeting point more times than I could count. Neutral ground, no corporate oversight, just people who actually did the work. I parked, walked in, and took a booth near the window. The waitress nodded at me like nothing had changed. Coffee, keep it coming, I said. I opened my laptop, connected to the public tracking systems, and started watching. Red indicators began appearing across the map. At first, just one near Chicago, a truck stationary longer than it should be, then 2, then 5. Each one a decision made by someone who didn't want to take a risk without confirmation. I refreshed the screen, more red. The system wasn't collapsing. It was freezing. My phone buzzed again. Incoming call. North Star internal. I let it ring, then again, and again. I took a sip of coffee instead. A new message came in. Gate access denied at Jersey Yard. Code not working. I knew exactly why. The security codes were updated weekly. Manual reset required. I handled that every Monday morning. Yesterday. I had been fired before I could. I leaned back, watching another cluster of red appear on the map. This one near the West Coast ports. Containers sitting, drivers waiting, time ticking. Another call came through, this time from a customs broker. I answered. Erla, we're getting conflicting signals, he said immediately. Your system isn't responding, and no one is picking up from your office. Are we cleared to proceed? I'm not authorized anymore, I replied. That leaves us exposed. Yes. A pause. Then, we're suspending until we get written confirmation. That would be the safe move. The line went dead. I set the phone down again. Across the diner, a couple of drivers were talking, laughing about something unrelated. Normal life continuing, unaware of the shift happening just a few miles away. On my screen, the map kept changing. More red. A cluster forming near Miami. Another near Dallas. each one a shipment that should have been moving, but wasn't. My phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a call. It was a message from Marissa. Why are shipments stopping? I stared at it for a moment. Then another message came. Almost immediately, fix this now. I let out a quiet breath. That was the moment it fully landed. They still didn't understand. They thought this was a technical issue, a glitch, something that could be reset with the right command. I picked up my phone, typed a response, then paused, then deleted it. There was nothing to explain, because nothing was broken. Everything was working exactly the way it was designed to, just without me holding it together. Outside, another North Star truck passed by, slowing as it approached the intersection, not stopping yet, but hesitating. And in this system, hesitation was the beginning of everything falling apart. Hesitation turned into confusion faster than anyone inside that building could keep up with. I didn't need to be there to see it. I could hear it in the tone of every call I chose not to answer, in every message that grew shorter and more urgent. By 11:05 a.m., the calls weren't just from partners anymore. They were internal, supervisors, mid-level managers, people who had spent years relying on systems that suddenly had no answers. I let most of them go to voicemail, not out of spite, out of necessity, because if I started responding, even once, I would become the solution again, and I wasn't going back to that. My laptop screen refreshed again. The map had changed. What had been scattered red points were now clusters, entire regions slowing down at once. Midwest, East Coast, Southern Corridor. I watched a major distribution hub near St. Louis go from yellow to red in under 2 minutes. That meant inbound trucks were stacking up faster than they could be processed. That meant schedules were already breaking. My phone buzzed again, this time. A message from someone inside. Daniel, warehouse lead. Erla, what's happening? We've got trucks lining up outside the gate. No clearance codes. System isn't updating. I stared at it for a second, then typed back. Check with leadership. 3 dots appeared immediately. They don't know. I didn't respond, because that was the truth. They didn't know. Another message came through. This time from IT support. We're seeing multiple system failures, access issues, verification delays. Were you running any manual overrides before you left? I almost smiled at that. Manual overrides. That was what they called it when something worked outside their understanding. No, I typed, then locked the phone again. Inside that building, everything was starting to collide. Systems that depended on approvals were waiting. Approvals that depended on access weren't coming. Access that depended on authorization no longer existed. And no one at the top knew how those pieces connected. A call came through again. Marissa. I let it ring once, twice. Then I answered. Erla. Her voice came sharp, controlled but cracking at the edges. What is going on? I leaned back in my seat, watching another cluster of trucks stall on the map. What do you mean? I asked. Shipments are stopping, she snapped. Drivers are calling in. Ports are refusing to process. The system isn't responding. The system is responding, I said calmly. Then why isn't anything moving? Because you removed the person who knew how to make it move. I didn't say that out loud. You should check your authorization protocols. I said instead. We have IT on it, she replied quickly. They're saying there are missing approvals tied to your account. That would make sense. A pause. Then, fix it. Not a request, a command. I looked out the window of the diner, watching a truck slow as it pulled into the parking lot. I'm not authorized to access anything, I said. You caused this, she said, her voice tightening. You don't just walk away and leave the company like this. I let that sit for a second, then answered. I didn't cause anything. I stopped preventing it. Silence. Real silence this time, not confusion. Understanding. Just a glimpse of it. Then she spoke again, louder. If you don't fix this, there will be consequences. I almost laughed. There already are, I said. I ended the call before she could respond. My phone lit up again immediately. I ignored it. On the screen in front of me, the system kept updating. More red, more delays, more decisions being made by people who suddenly didn't have the information they needed. Inside North Star. Panic wasn't loud yet, but it was everywhere. In every unanswered question, in every stalled truck, in every manager realizing they didn't know what to do next. And panic like that doesn't stabilize. It spreads. Panic doesn't stay contained. It leaks into decisions, and decisions made under pressure, without understanding, don't just fail, they escalate. I saw it happen in real time. Around 1:20 p.m., a new alert popped up on one of the public tracking feeds I kept open. It wasn't a standard delay notification. It was flagged differently. Priority incident, North Star unit, Interstate 84. I leaned forward slightly, focusing on the details as they updated. Hazmat involved. My stomach tightened. That route shouldn't have been active without clearance. Not today. Not under these conditions. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts, already knowing who to call. Raphael, union supervisor, someone who didn't take unnecessary risks. He answered on the first ring. "Erla," he said, voice low, tense. "Tell me you're seeing this." "I am," I replied. "Was that one of yours?" "No," he said immediately. "We held our drivers. Nobody moves without proper sign-off. Then who's driving it?" Pause. Then, contract hire. Pulled off a digital board. No union verification. I closed my eyes for a second. Of course they did. When systems fail, people look for shortcuts. And shortcuts in logistics don't cost money first. They cost control. "What happened?" I asked. "He didn't have the right certification," Raphael said. "Took a turn too fast. Jackknifed the trailer. We've got a spill. Chemical." I leaned back slowly, the weight of it settling in. "How bad? Bad enough." He replied, "Highways shut down. Hazmat team is on the way. State patrol already there." I exhaled quietly. This wasn't a delay anymore. This was exposure. "Driver," I asked. "Alive?" Raphael said, "Injured, but alive." I nodded, even though he couldn't see it. "That's something." "Yeah," he replied. "But your company, they're about to get a visit from more than just inspectors." I knew what that meant. Department of Transportation, environmental agencies, compliance audits. And once those started, they didn't stop at one incident. They opened everything. I told them not to move that load. Raphael added, "Told them it needed proper clearance. They didn't listen. They don't know what that means." I said, "No?" He agreed. "They're about to learn." The line went quiet for a moment. Then he spoke again. "You still on their side?" I looked at the screen in front of me, the red clusters spreading, the incident report updating in real time. "No," I said, "not anymore." "Good," he replied, "because this is going to get ugly." The call ended. I set the phone down slowly, staring at the alert as more details came in. Road closure extended, hazard classification upgraded, federal notification triggered. That last line mattered. Federal meant investigation, investigation meant accountability, and accountability meant someone was going to answer for this. I already knew who. My phone buzzed again. "Marissa," I hesitated for half a second, then answered. "What now?" she demanded, her voice no longer controlled. "There's been an incident." I said, "I know." She snapped. "We're handling it." With who I asked. Silence. Then, "We hired a driver to keep the route moving. We couldn't afford more delays. That load required certified clearance." I said, "And direct oversight. We didn't have access to the system." She shot back. "We had to act." I leaned back, closing my eyes briefly. "That's not acting," I said quietly. "That's guessing. You're not helping." She said, "I'm not responsible." I replied. Another pause. Longer this time. Then her voice came back. Quieter. What happens now? I opened my eyes, looking at the screen, at the words that were already writing the outcome for her. The investigation starts. I said. And after that, I didn't answer immediately, because there was no version of this that ended well. After that, I said finally, they don't just look at the accident. They look at everything. Silence filled the line. Not confusion, not denial, just the first real moment of realization. And once that door opens, it doesn't close again. Once the investigation begins, the market doesn't wait, it reacts. I could already see it happening. The messages changed tone. They weren't asking what was wrong anymore. They were asking what to do next. And more importantly, who to trust. That's when the shift truly starts. Not when a company fails, but when people decide to move on. I closed my laptop for a moment and leaned back in the booth, letting the noise of the diner fade into the background. The pieces were already moving in my head. Not as revenge. Not even as strategy, but as continuation. Because supply chains don't stop. They reroute. I picked up my phone and scrolled to a contact I hadn't used in months. Adrian Cole, Regional Director at Titan Logistics Group, our biggest competitor. He answered on the second ring. Erla Moore, he said, voice smooth, controlled. I was wondering when you'd call. I'm available, I said. A brief pause. Meaning I'm no longer with North Star. Another pause. Longer this time, not surprise, calculation. Where are you? He asked. Still in the city. Stay there, he said. I'll send a car. I'm not looking for a job, I added. I didn't think you were. He replied, We'll talk. The line went dead. I sat there for a moment, then reopened my laptop. The map hadn't improved. If anything, it looked worse. Entire corridors stalled, ports backing up, secondary carriers refusing to move without verified authorization. North Star wasn't just struggling, it was bleeding. My phone buzzed again. Messages from partners I'd known for years. Are you setting up somewhere else? Who's handling your routes now? We're not moving until we hear from you. That last one mattered. Trust doesn't transfer automatically. It follows people. I started responding. Short messages, direct, I'm transitioning. Hold for instructions. Then I moved to the next step. I called the Port of Clearwater Authority. Erla, the director, answered, relief clear in his voice. We've got containers stacking up. Your company isn't responding. Redirect, I said. To where Titan route code 47B, temporary. You authorized to do that? I paused, then answered. I am now. A breath on the other end. Then, understood. The line clicked off. That was the first shift. Not loud, not public, but real. I made another call, then another. Midwest carriers, independent operators, warehouse coordinators. Each conversation the same structure, short, clear. Move with me, or wait and lose time. Most didn't hesitate, because time is money, and uncertainty costs more than loyalty. An hour later, a black sedan pulled up outside the diner. Clean, quiet, out of place. I grabbed my bag and stepped outside. The driver opened the door without a word. Inside, the air smelled like leather and something expensive. I didn't ask where we were going. I already knew. We pulled up to a glass building downtown, Titan's regional headquarters. Adrian was waiting in the lobby. Same suit, same expression. The kind of calm that comes from understanding leverage. You look like someone who just changed an industry, he said as I approached. I stopped holding one together, I replied. He smiled slightly. Close enough. We walked to a conference room overlooking the city. From that height, everything looked stable, controlled. It wasn't. Tell me what you want, Adrian said. Autonomy. I answered. Control over operations. No interference from people who don't understand the system. And what do we get? I looked at him. The network, I said. the relationships, the trust. He didn't respond immediately. He didn't need to. He already knew the value of that. North Star won't recover from this quickly, he said. They won't recover at all, I replied. Another pause. Then he nodded. Then we moved fast. I pulled out my phone and opened the map again. Red clusters still spreading. But now, something new was appearing. Movement, not under North Star, under new routing paths. My routing paths. Adrian leaned slightly forward. Watching. You're already doing it, he said. I don't wait, I replied. He smiled. Good, he said, because neither do we. And just like that. It wasn't about stopping a collapse anymore. It was about building something in its place by the end of the week. North Star wasn't a company anymore. It was a case study. Trading was halted. Operations suspended. Regulatory investigations expanding by the hour. What started as a system issue had turned into a full-scale collapse, and there was no version of it that could be repaired from the inside. Marissa didn't last. The board removed her quietly at first, then publicly when the reports came out. Mismanagement, negligence, failure to maintain compliance protocols, words that sounded clinical, but carried real consequences. I heard she tried to defend her decisions, blamed the system, blamed the transition, even blamed me. It didn't matter, because by then, the system had already moved on. At Titan Logistics, things were different, not easier, not quieter, just clearer. I had a glass-walled office now, overlooking the same network I used to manage from the shadows, screens filled with live data, routes flowing, shipments moving, the machine working again, not because it was redesigned, but because it was understood. Most of the partners came with me, not because I asked them to, because they chose certainty. Adrian kept his word, no interference, no unnecessary oversight. When I made a call, it stood. When I flagged a risk, it was addressed. Control, not chaos. One evening, as I watched a line of shipments move smoothly across the map, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You think you won, no name, no explanation. I didn't need one. I looked at the screen for a moment, then locked the phone and set it aside. This was never about winning. It was about knowing what held everything together, and what happened when it was taken away. Looking back on everything that happened, I realized this story was never just about losing a job or watching a company fall apart. It was about understanding what truly creates value. Through this experience, I've learned 3 powerful lessons that changed the way I see work and leadership. First, real value often hides behind the scenes. The people who keep things running aren't always the ones in the spotlight, but they are the ones everything depends on. Never underestimate your own impact, even if others fail to see it. Second, leadership is not about control or appearances. It's about responsibility. When leaders focus more on image than substance, they risk destroying the very foundation they stand on. True leadership protects people, systems, and long-term stability. Third, never tie your worth to a place that doesn't recognize it. Walking away can feel risky, but sometimes it's the only way to create space for something better. When you know your value, you don't beg to stay, you choose where you belong. Now I want to ask you, which of these lessons left the deepest impression on you? Your perspective matters more than you think, and sharing it might help someone else see their situation differently. If this story made you reflect, even just a little, consider subscribing to the channel, leaving a comment, liking the video, and sharing it with someone who might need it. Together, we're building a space where every voice has value, and every lesson can make a difference.
Welcome to Boardroom Revenge Stories, a channel focused on workplace conflict, corporate betrayal, power struggles, and quiet justice. Our stories follow a structured workflow to deliver a consistent, immersive experience. We start by analyzing real discussions on Reddit, Facebook, Quora, and blogs. Next, we craft original scripts using AI tools like ChatGPT. We then use 11 Labs to transform text into high-quality voice and edit everything in CapCut for a smooth, cinematic finish. Thumbnails are designed with Canva, and every video is carefully reviewed before release. These stories go beyond entertainment, revealing how power truly